What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Grace Jones as we continue through the 1986 album Inside Story. Thank you again to Seb. And the next track is Victor Should Have Been a Jazz Musician, which feels as oddly specific as the previous song title, though in a less international intrigue sort of way. But yeah, I wonder who Victor is. I wonder whether this normative attitude of the narrator is shared by Victor. I wonder if Victor's still alive. I wonder what Victor ended up doing. I wonder the context of his decision or unavoidable circumstance that led him to not be a jazz musician. So yes, all sorts of questions abound in advance, and yet I don't necessarily expect to know what will be happening here, meaning even with a name, even with an indication of what hasn't happened, and an implication of something else taking place, and maybe a suggestion of a longer timeline. I really have no idea where this will go, so let's give a listen and see what I can pick up on a first hearing. This is Grace Jones. The track is Victor Should Have Been a Jazz Musician, and it's from her 1986 album Inside Story.
Nina Simone. The concert was over. There was still a band playing to wrap up. The bongo man laid his beat with his hand. I closed my eyes and looked at him. Victor should have been a jazz musician. I said to myself, Victor should have been a jazz musician. I looked at his face and I saw Victor. Looked at his smile and I saw Victor. At his hair, I thought Victor should have been a jazz musician. Victor should have been a jazz musician. There were people dancing on the floor, dancing on the floor. They were so living in a fast beat in a city that's hot, dancing all the Latinos and the Puerto Ricans. Victor seems happy, he doesn't even know himself. He's gotta look inside to know in his first life. Victor was a jazz musician. Gotta look inside jazz musician. In his first life, he was a jazz musician. Victor was a jazz musician. Somewhere, Victor plays his music. He loves his music. Somewhere, Victor loves his music. He plays his music. Somewhere, Victor is a jazz musician.
I love that ending. That's such a fascinating tune, especially lyrically, more on that in a moment, but sonically, it is sort of the vibe that it's talking about, meaning it's this cool nightclub style jazz with different instrumental elements. There's definitely brass flourishing, I think a trumpet. Also, there's, I think, some keyboard chords along the way. There's a nice jazzy little guitar riff. I think there's some woodwinds even at a point. There's definitely jazz style drumming, just little tapping on the side of the snare, little hi-hat flourishes, and ultimately this minimal and yet very expressive sonic atmosphere. And then you have Grace's vocals, which run from spoken and almost whispered to a bit more full and melodic. And it's like, she's in her head seemingly, kind of telling us what she's envisioning. And then eventually it's like she's almost going metaphysical, that like, oh, in his first life, Victor was a jazz musician somewhere, in some time and place, in some other world, in some other universe. Victor was a jazz musician. Even at the beginning, it's like he should have been one. He should have been one. So it's almost like she's projecting him into other worlds, into a previous life, into some other dimension. And thus it feels like we're sort of in her head, and she's like, she says right at the beginning, like, I closed my eyes and then I looked at Victor, which, like, you could do that in sequence. You could close your eyes, open them again, look at someone. But it's like she's imagining him, or like extrapolating from the real him into some, again, vision of what he should be, and then sort of asserting that, no, he was that. He was that in another life. He was that somewhere else, and he's into his music, and he is a jazz musician. So, yeah, I'm really intrigued by what's happening here narratively, or in terms of the scene painting. But yes, she's describing him a bit physically, but also, in the context of this environment, which, I imagined her at a jazz club, but maybe he's not on stage, or at the very least, like, what was it, Nina Simone that she like saw, and then it's like, oh, there was this other band after, and they were, doing the closing set of the night, where, maybe some people have now filtered out, and it's kind of, the waning hours of the club. And it's like, I don't know, was he like one of the members of this other band, or was he like just someone at the club? Was he someone who was, setting up or something like that? It feels like he was a more peripheral figure, but then she just kind of makes him the star of the narrative that's going on in her head. So, yeah, a really interesting one lyrically. Obviously, I could be missing something or misinterpreting what I did here, but yeah, really fascinating tune. And Grace, she definitely has this unique vibe. It's, whether she's doing a tune that's a bit like fuller and more energetic, or here a bit lighter and more sparse, she just gives off this very unique quality no matter how she's singing, but certainly here where, it's a bit of a dynamic vocal performance. So yeah, another very compelling and entertaining one. Let me know what you think, and I will see you next time. Peace.